Let's stop pretending this marriage still works, Lucy. You've spent 26 years being comfortable while I built this life. I'm tired of carrying someone who's going nowhere.
The divorce papers were still in my purse. Not because I hadn't read them. I'd read every line 3 times, sitting in my car outside the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta on a Tuesday morning in October, with a cold cup of coffee in the cup holder and Aretha Franklin playing softly on the radio, because some mornings you just need someone who understood. I had signed them. 57 years old, and I had signed away 26 years of my life on page 11, line 4, where it said respondent acknowledges full and final settlement. And the full and final settlement was the 2019 Camry I was sitting in, $38,000 in a savings account Donald didn't know existed, and my mother's cast iron skillet. I kept the skillet on purpose, not because it was valuable, because every Sunday morning for 26 years I had made Donald's breakfast in that skillet. Eggs, turkey sausage, toast with the crusts cut off the way he liked, and I decided that if I was leaving with almost nothing, I was at least leaving with the thing that had fed him. Let him figure out Sunday mornings on his own. I was still sitting there when my phone rang. My youngest sister, Christine, calling from Memphis. I let it go to voicemail. Christine meant well, but she had an opinion about everything, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for opinions right now. I had just enough bandwidth to breathe, start the car, and drive. So I drove. No destination. Just southwest on I-20, past the airport, past the subdivisions thinning out into Georgia flatlands, past the roadside stands selling boiled peanuts, and the churches with hand-painted signs that said things like God isn't finished with you yet. I thought, Lord, I hope that's true. I pulled off the highway at a town called Bremner. Not a town really, more of an interruption in the scenery, a gas station, a diner, a post office the size of a coat closet. I needed to use the restroom. I needed water. I needed 5 minutes of not being a woman whose husband had secretly filed for divorce in July and waited until September to tell her, by which point he had already moved Christine Elena Hartwell. Yes, that was her name, Christine Elena, which I found almost cosmically insulting, into the Buckhead house that I had decorated, maintained, and loved for 19 years. I parked. I got out of the car. And that is when the motorcade came through Bremner, Georgia. There were 6 vehicles, 3 black SUVs, a town car, another SUV, and bringing up the rear, a vehicle I couldn't immediately identify, long, dark, the kind of car that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. They move through the town's single intersection slowly, the way motorcades do when they're not in a hurry because they've never had to be. The gas station owner came outside and stood with his hands in his pockets, watching. The diner's screen door swung open and a woman in an apron leaned against the frame. I stood beside my Camry and watched too. The town car stopped first. Then, one by one, the others. Right there at the intersection of what the rusted sign called Bremner Road and Old Mill Highway. A door opened on the town car. A man in a dark suit stepped out, looked around briefly, and then looked directly at me. He walked toward me. I looked behind me, genuinely certain he was walking toward someone else. There was no one behind me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. He was perhaps 35, composed, professional. "Are you having car trouble?" "No," I said. "I just stopped." He nodded slowly. "Mrs. Whitfield would like to speak with you, if you're willing." I blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" "Cornelia Whitfield," he said. "She'd like to come to you, if that's all right." I had no idea who Cornelia Whitfield was, but something in the way he said her name, quietly, with the particular respect people reserve for things that have earned it, made me stay very still. "All right," I said. The rear door of the town car opened, and the woman who stepped out of it was perhaps 75 years old, with white hair cut close to her head, dark skin, and the kind of posture that isn't learned in finishing school but forged over decades of refusing to bend. She wore no jewelry except small pearl studs. Her coat was cashmere. Her shoes were flat. She walked toward me across the gravel of the Bremner gas station like she was crossing a ballroom floor. She stopped 3 feet away and looked at my face with an expression I can only describe as careful. "You're Lucy Gaines," she said. Not a question. I said. Then caught myself. "I am. Lucy Gaineswebb. Or just Gaines now, I suppose." Something passed through her eyes. "Your mother," she said, "was Patricia Ann Gaines, born 1949 in Macon, Georgia." My mother had been dead for 11 years. "Yes," I whispered. Cornelia Whitfield reached into the pocket of her cashmere coat and produced a photograph. She held it out to me. I took it. It was black and white. 2 young women, perhaps 19 or 20, standing in front of what looked like a university building, laughing at something outside the frame. One of them I recognized immediately, my mother, young and bright-eyed in a way I only knew from other old photographs. The other woman in the picture was unmistakably a young Cornelia Whitfield. "We were roommates," she said. "Spelman College. 1967. Her voice was steady, but something beneath it was not. "Your mother was the best friend I ever had, and I owe her a debt I have never been able to repay." The gas station owner had gone back inside. The woman in the diner apron had disappeared. The motorcade sat silent and patient at the intersection, and I stood in a gravel parking lot in Bremner, Georgia, holding a 50-year-old photograph of my mother laughing, with divorce papers in my purse and Aretha Franklin still playing faintly from my car. "Would you ride with us?" Cornelia Whitfield said. "I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." I looked at my Camry. I looked at her. I got in the town car. Cornelia Whitfield smelled like gardenias and old libraries. She sat beside me in the back of the town car with her hands folded in her lap, and she told me a story that began in 1968 and had been looking for its ending ever since. My mother, Patricia Gaines, had been brilliant. I knew that. What I didn't know, what no one had ever told me, was that in 1969, during their junior year at Spelman, my mother had co-written a research paper on educational access in rural Southern communities. A paper that a professor named Dr. Harold Whitfield, Cornelia's father, had submitted to a national education policy journal under his own name alone. My mother had never received credit. She had never spoken about it publicly. She was 21 years old, black, female, and the daughter of a sharecropper from Macon. Dr. Whitfield was a tenured professor and a respected man. My mother had simply absorbed it, the way women absorb things that would destroy them if they carried them too loudly. But Cornelia had known. She had been 17, still in high school when it happened, but she had read her father's correspondence, had seen drafts of the paper in her mother's handwriting that said co-authored with P. Gaines on the cover page. A cover page that disappeared from the final submission. "I confronted my father when I was 23, Cornelia said. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands tightened slightly in her lap. "He told me I was imagining things, that I was being disloyal to the family." She paused. "I was not imagining things." Dr. Harold Whitfield had died in 1987, leaving behind a foundation, the Whitfield Institute for Southern Education, endowed with $4 million and built largely on the reputation that paper had established for him. The paper that had been co-written by a young woman from Macon, Georgia, who later became a schoolteacher, married a man named Joseph Gaines, and raised 3 daughters in a house on Prentice Street. My mother, Cornelia, had spent 30 years quietly redirecting foundation resources, growing the endowment, waiting, building something that could not be easily dismissed or contested. The Whitfield Institute for Southern Education was now worth $94 million. And 3 weeks ago, at 75 years old, Cornelia Whitfield had finalized a restructuring of the Institute's board that created a permanent co-directorship, a position she had held in trust, waiting for the right moment. Waiting, it turned out, for me. I tried to find you for 2 years, she said. Your sister Christine was difficult to reach. Your other sister had moved. And then my assistant saw your name on a courthouse filing in Fulton County, and she stopped. Looked at me directly. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry your mother never received what was hers while she was alive to receive it. The Georgia Flatlands moved past the windows. I was holding the photograph of my mother, and I was not crying, which surprised me, because I felt like the inside of me was doing something enormous and quiet that had no name yet. What does the co-directorship involve? I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The faintest smile crossed Cornelia's face. Running half of a $94 million educational foundation. Sitting on 3 university advisory boards. Overseeing scholarship programs that currently fund over 300 students annually. She tilted her head slightly. Do you have a doctorate? No, I said. I withdrew my application in 2017. What was your field? Education policy. She nodded. Georgia State still has a program. I'm 57 years old. My mother got her master's degree at 61, Cornelia said simply. She said it was the best thing she ever did for herself. Second best thing was outliving my father, but that's another conversation. I laughed. It surprised both of us. It was the first time I had laughed in 11 weeks. Here is what Donald Derek Webb knew about me after 26 years of marriage. I was quiet. I was reliable. I cooked well. I managed the household without requiring much assistance or acknowledgement. I had a small private practice as an occupational therapist that he referred to as Lucy's Little Clinic. I drove a practical car. I didn't embarrass him at professional events. I didn't ask for much. Here is what Donald Derek Webb did not know about me. For 6 years, from 2014 until 2020, the year he told me about the divorce, I had been quietly consulting for the Georgia Department of Education. Not officially, not with the title, through a former colleague named Dr. Adiz Obi, who ran a policy research unit and needed someone who could translate clinical data about childhood learning into language that legislators could understand and act on. I had written 11 policy briefs. 3 of them had been incorporated into statewide educational reform initiatives. I had never told Donald because, and this is the part that breaks my heart a little, even now, I had tried to tell him once, in 2016, over dinner, and he had nodded in the specific way he nodded when he was not listening and said, "That's good, Lucy," and refilled his own glass without offering to refill mine. So I stopped telling him things. I also had not told him that Dr. Adiz Obi had, in 2019, recommended me to the board of a nonprofit called the Southern Learning Collaborative, a quiet, serious organization that provided teacher training resources to under-resourced school districts in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. I had joined the board as an at-large member. I attended 4 meetings a year in Birmingham. I told Donald I was visiting my college roommate. He never asked which roommate. He never asked anything, really. 26 years of not asking. And now Christine Elena Hartwell was living in my house in Buckhead, cooking in my kitchen, though not with my cast iron skillet, and Donald was presumably telling her things the way he had never told me things, and she was presumably listening the way I had pretended not to notice he never listened to me. I thought about all of this on the drive back to Atlanta in Cornelia Whitfield's town car. I thought about my mother, who had written half of a paper that built a man's reputation, and who had never said a bitter word about it that I ever heard, who had taught 3rd grade for 31 years, who had pressed wildflowers between wax paper with me on summer afternoons and called it science, who had raised me to be quiet and capable and to believe that good work eventually found its way to the right hands. Mama, I think you were right. The Whitfield Institute's annual benefit dinner was held 4 weeks later at the Biltmore, Atlanta, a building that had seen enough Georgia history in its bones to know when something significant was walking through its doors. I was not on the program. Cornelia had suggested it, and I had agreed. Let me come as a guest first. Let me learn the room before the room learns me. There was wisdom in that, and I recognized it. I wore deep green. My own choice, for my own reasons. The room was full of Atlanta's educational establishment. University presidents, school superintendents, legislators, foundation directors, donors whose names were on library wings and science buildings across the state. The kind of gathering that made decisions over appetizers that affected classrooms for decades. I arrived alone, which was fine. I was getting used to alone. The getting used to it was the hardest part, and also, in ways I hadn't expected, one of the most clarifying experiences of my adult life. Alone meant I ate what I wanted for dinner. Alone meant I watched what I chose on Sunday evenings, and nobody sighed heavily beside me. Alone meant I woke up on Saturday mornings in a quiet apartment near Grant Park and made exactly 1 cup of very good coffee and sat by the window and listened to the neighborhood come awake and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Space. I was finding out what I thought about things when nobody else's opinion was filling the room. I found a seat near the center of the room and was reading the program when I heard a voice I recognized. Lucy Gaineswebb. Donald. Of course. He was standing 8 feet away in a charcoal suit, champagne flute in hand, the particular expression on his face of a man recalculating something faster than he'd like to let on. Beside him, Christine Elena was in red, bold, unapologetic red, the kind of color that announces itself, with diamond earrings that caught every light in the room. She looked at me, and something moved behind her eyes that she quickly rearranged into a smile. "What a surprise," Donald said. "Is it?" I said pleasantly. "You know the Whitfield people?" "A little," I said. Christine stepped forward. She had a particular gift for stepping forward at moments when her presence was an answer to a question nobody had asked out loud. "Donald mentioned you used to do some volunteer work in education," she said. "Emphasis on volunteer. Emphasis on used to. It's wonderful that you've stayed connected." "Thank you," I said. "Are you at a table near the front?" she asked, glancing toward the stage with the practiced nonchalance of someone who already knew where the important tables were. "I'm not sure yet," I said, which was the truth. "We're at table 1, she said. Not unkindly, just factually. The way people mention things that they know carry weight. "Congratulations," I said, and I excused myself. I found the event coordinator near the registration table and gave her my name. She checked her list, looked up with a slightly different expression than I expected, and said, "Oh, Ms. Gaines." "Yes. Mrs. Whitfield asked that you be moved. You're at the head table." I looked at her. "With Mrs. Whitfield," she clarified. "Stage left. There's a place card." I walked to the head table. There was a place card. Lucy Gaines, co-director designate, Whitfield Institute for Southern Education. I stood and read it twice. Then I sat down. Cornelia Whitfield did not make a grand entrance. She was simply there, seated at the head table when the program began, calm and unhurried as a woman who had already won every argument she was ever going to have and decided to spend her remaining years doing something useful with the proceeds. The evening's program moved through speeches and a video tribute and a presentation of the Institute's annual impact report, 312 scholarship recipients, 14 school districts served, 7 research partnerships with universities across the South. Then the program's host, a woman named Dr. Sandra Briggs, president of one of Atlanta's oldest HBCUs, stepped to the podium and said, "Before we close, Mrs. Whitfield has asked to make an announcement." Cornelia rose. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet for people who have earned silence. She spoke for perhaps 4 minutes. Her voice was clear and unhurried and precise. She talked about her father's work. She talked about the paper. She said the name Patricia and Gaines and said it fully and without apology, and in the hush that followed she said, "My father built this institute's foundation on work that was not entirely his. It is past time to correct that record. And it is past time to bring that work back into this family in the only way I know how." She turned and looked at me. "Lucy Gaines," she said, "would you stand?" I stood. I was 57 years old in a deep green dress with my mother's last name on a place card in front of me and 300 people watching. "Patricia Gaines gave this institute its soul before it knew it had one," Cornelia said. "Her daughter is going to help us figure out what to do with it next." The applause started slowly, the way genuine applause does, building from understanding rather than reflex. I did not look toward table 1, but I knew, with the particular certainty of a woman who had spent 26 years reading a room she was never fully welcomed into, that Donald Derek Webb was watching. And that Christine Elena Hartwell was very, very still. Donald found me near the coat check. He always did, in my imagination of how these moments would go. And now here he was, real, in his charcoal suit. Christine conspicuously absent, the champagne flute replaced with something that looked like sparkling water. He said my name. I turned around. Co-director, he said, trying for lightness, landing somewhere flatter. I didn't know. There's quite a bit you didn't know, I said. Not harshly. Simply. The policy work, he said. The boards. I had no idea you were. I tried to tell you once, I said. In 2016. Over dinner. He opened his mouth. You said, that's good, Lucy, I said. And then you refilled your glass. He closed his mouth. I watched something move across his face that I had not seen there in a very long time. Something unguarded, something that might have been grief if he were a man who allowed himself that. I think, he said slowly, that I made a significant mistake. Several, I agreed. But we don't need to catalog them tonight. Lucy. Donald. I pulled on my coat. I genuinely hope you are happy. I mean that. I hope Christine is good to you, and I hope you are good to her, and I hope you figure out, somewhere along the way, how to pay attention to someone you love before you lose them. I looked at him one last time. I needed you to see me, and you never did. That's not a crime. But it was a long time to be invisible. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I walked out of the Biltmore Atlanta into the October night. Cornelia Whitfield introduced me to a man named Ronald Briggs at a board meeting in February. He was 59, a retired civil rights attorney turned education advocate, quiet in the way that people are quiet when they've processed enough of life to stop needing noise. He had kind hands and listened carefully and laughed at the right moments without announcing that he was laughing. He brought coffee to our third meeting without being asked, because at the first two meetings I had mentioned, once each time, that I'd missed my morning cup. He had been paying attention. It was such a small thing. It hit me like a wave. I enrolled in Georgia State's doctoral program in education policy in the fall, the program I had withdrawn from in 2017 when Donald asked what the degree was for. My cohort was mostly people in their 30s. One other woman was my age. We became friends over the particular solidarity of being the oldest people in the room and not caring. My mother's name was formally added to the 1969 paper's official record in a ceremony at Spelman College in March. It was a small ceremony. Cornelia was there. My sister Christine flew in from Memphis. My daughter Elena drove up from Savannah. There was a photograph afterward. 3 generations of Gaines women standing on the steps of Spelman in the spring Atlanta sunshine, squinting into the light and laughing at something my daughter had said. I have it on my windowsill now. Some mornings I make my coffee and I sit and I look at it, and I think about what it means to have your name somewhere permanent. To be written into the record of something that mattered. To not have to shrink yourself down to fit inside someone else's idea of what you should be. My grandmother used to say that some debts aren't paid in money. Some debts are paid in becoming. I am becoming, at 57 years old, the woman my mother prayed for when she pressed wildflowers between wax paper on summer afternoons and taught me to call it science. I think she knew. Mothers usually do. If you are sitting somewhere right now feeling like the story is over, like the best chapters are behind you, like the settlement was final, like the house is gone and the years are spent and there is nothing left to be claimed, I want you to hear this. Patricia Gaines wrote half of a paper in 1969 and never saw her name on it. But her name is on it now. It is never too late for the record to be corrected. It is never too late to walk into a room and take a seat that was waiting for you. It is never too late to say your name out loud, your whole name, the one that was yours before anyone else's was added to it, and let the room rearrange itself around you. You were never invisible. You were simply in the wrong room. Find your room. Walk in. Sit down. The place card already has your name.